Here on set, I'm very excited. Marianne Williamson, she is a candidate for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination. Welcome, Marianne.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I was thinking you're going to be on the road campaigning because you just launched your bid. Congratulations, by the way. It must be so excited for you. So first, can you tell us why did you decide to run? Because the field is, as I said, already pretty crowded. There are women, there are people of color, there are, so many people already, and it's only going to get more crowded. Why did you decide to come out?
I think whenever you feel a calling within yourself to do something that you feel is yours to do, it can't be about who else is doing it. It has to be about the calling within your own heart. And I'm sure that everybody else is feeling the same way. I mean, you have to kind of put your blinders on. What the people to the left or to the right are doing is not what's most relevant. We are living in very serious times, and we all have to move into a very deep place within ourselves to find the energies, the insights, and the activation in order to take us through these times to a better place. The dominant political conversation is not a container for those kinds of energies. It is superficial, it is narrow, it reacts only to circumstances, it does not inspire vision, it treats the leaves, but it doesn't treat the roots. And so I feel that somebody, and you do what's in front of you, must introduce a conversation that speaks to the deeper dynamics of what went wrong, what's happening now, what we need to do to make things right, and the place we need to find within ourselves as citizens in order to make that happen.
And like Carrie said, this is already, like me and Carrie said, this is already a pretty crowded field. So what makes you stand out? Because you don't have any office experience, holding a public office, which is not necessarily a bad thing in this climate, right? Exactly. So what do you bring to the table? And most importantly, given our viewers are, some of the youngest voting cohorts, what do you bring to them? What are some crises that you can address for them?
In terms of what makes me stand out, I don't wake up in the morning and ask what makes me stand out. I think all of us, all human beings, when we speak from our deepest, authentic truth, stand out. So that's the stand out part. In terms of your younger viewers, I don't think anyone who is born in the 21st century or is going to live the majority of their lives in the 21st century should be burdened by this relic of late 20th century political and economic thinking. So what I bring to young people is a 21st century perspective, which is very different than the 20th century. It's far more about the realization of the consciousness that produces effects, much more realization that we are one world, far more of a realization that what we do to others will come back to us. The 20th century worldview is increasingly obsolete. And like I said, people who really their lives aren't about the 20th century should not be burdened by the prejudices of the 20th.
So you mentioned that there is this idea of what you put out coming back to you, and I can say as a conservative, when I hear the president critiquing the press and saying, you're not understanding us, and Pew Research recently, just a few weeks ago, released a poll that said 75% of Republicans believe that the national media, the mainstream press, does not understand them, by far more than how Democrats felt that way. And I say this as a Republican as well. Yeah. I believe that basically since the 60s, that the mainstream national media, Hollywood, entertainment, celebrities, they didn't understand or appreciate our culture. And so I believe that it's really karma coming back in many respects that we have a president who's finally standing up to that.
Well, I think that's pretty absurd, actually. I think there are high-minded conservative values. There are high-minded conservative values and high-minded liberal values, and Eisenhower said the American mind at its best is both. I understand that. But the president is not a spokesperson for high-minded conservative values, when in fact it is proven that he is telling things that are false so many times. There are high-minded conservative truth-telling conservatives that I respect and that I think get respect from media. But I don't think that the problem in our country today is liberal or conservative. I think that polarity is a bit of a distraction. I think the problem is an authoritarian corporatism, which is neither liberal nor conservative. So right now, we need soulful, truth-telling conservatives, and we need soulful, truth-telling liberals on both sides. I just don't feel that the president is one of those, and I don't think the media does either.
But the problem is that, and in fact, Bill Maher pointed this out, and I agreed with him as far as to the question of high-minded conservatives. He said in 2016, he said, we owe Mitt Romney an apology. We owe John McCain an apology.
I think that's true to that.
we painted them as the great Satan, and they were high-minded conservatives.
I think
I think that is very true what the president says. So in that respect, he is the only Republican who is truly pushing back on these false narratives.
You're saying the president is?
Well, President Trump is pushing back against media who is unfair, because even if he himself is his language is, I agree, sometimes too aggressive, he is standing up for conservative values.
I actually don't see where he's standing up for conservative values. There's a difference between aggressive language and lies. There are, and I think that I agree with what Bill Maher said, there are very intelligent conservatives. Mitt Romney is an example, George Will is an example, David Brooks is an example, Bret Stephens is an example, but they don't lie. There's a difference between lying and aggressive language. We know the president's language can be crude and aggressive, and that everybody can think what they want to think. But I think the media, absolutely. I wish that there was more conservative media. I wish there were more conservatives. I wish there were more Republicans who were calling out the president on his lies. It is very bad for this country, and that's not about conservative or liberal. That's about truth-telling versus lies.
Okay, and Marianne, I want to ask you the obvious question, which is back in the year 2014, you ran as an independent.
I did.
In my home state, California's 33rd district, I believe. Why are you running as a Democrat this time? And, why?
Well, the Constitution does not mention political parties, and George Washington warned us against them. I think this whole dichotomy, including liberal versus conservative, is getting old, and it's a distraction from the deeper things we need to be discussing. At the time, I felt it was a principled thing to do, because I do feel the American political conversation should involve more than just Democrats, Republicans, or even conservatives and liberals. However, this is a different time. And given this president, not because he's a conservative, which I actually don't think he is, but given his performance, his policies, and his falsehoods, I would not risk sending 10 votes away from a candidate with a good chance of defeating him. I think that this whole issue of the parties is like two broken legs and two broken arms, but what we're facing now is more like a bullet close to the heart.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
That's
and I happen to agree with you that, lies are lies. And truth is, they're still right and wrong. And then I want to ask you that when the last time you ran in 2014, you got 13.2% of the vote, and you didn't win.
There were 16 candidates,
yes,
by the way.
Yes, and so now you're on the national stage, and time has changed, as you said. What are you doing differently, and where are you going to focus on? What are you going to do in the upcoming year?
I'm the same person, and in many ways my message is the same, just 4 years have passed, but I know something about political campaigns now. When I ran before, I thought it was legitimate to run because of my understanding of the issues, but I vastly underestimated the significance of the fact that I didn't know how to run a political campaign. President Obama lost his first congressional campaign. Many people do. It's kind of like the equivalent of the start of marriage in politics. I'm sorry, what?
President Bush lost his first.
Yeah, exactly. And absolutely he did. And President Clinton lost one of his runs for governor of Arkansas. In politics, it's kind of like, oops. And also I think you learn from failure just like you learn from success, if you're open to it. So hopefully I learned. And Ray Dalio, there's this book called Principles by Ray Dalio.
Love that book.
Love that book. I learned so much. And he said something that really I took to heart. He said, if you're going to live a meaningful life, you're going to take risks. If you're going to take risks, you'll probably fail sometimes. And he said, if you fail, fail well. So I like to think I failed well.
I actually hosted the Greenwich Economic Forum last November with Ray Dalio, and then he talked about his book in great length, and I thought it's a really great book. Everybody else should go get it if you haven't.
He's a meditator, too. He brings together many dimensions, and I don't know him personally, but a great admirer.
Yeah. And then, Karen, I want to ask you, you are Oprah's, I would say, very close friend, right? With Oprah.
I'm honored to be able to call her friend.
Well, a lot of the press coverage said that you were Oprah's spiritual guru.
Yeah.
No, definitely that's a mischaracterization.
Fake news?
Pardon?
Fake news?
It's the way I don't know about fake news, but it's definitely one of the ways in which the media will mischaracterize something.
Okay, so what's your real relationship with Oprah?
I have been honored to have had my book supported on her program, and what I've received from her in terms of counsel and wisdom is every bit as much, if not more, than she has received from me. Oprah is counselor to the world, and And who among us isn't? We're all giving and we're all receiving, and you know that we need to move into a deeper conversation. We all have ideas, and we all put them on the table, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and given that you two are at least friends,
yes,
do you expect an endorsement from her?
No, I do not expect an endorsement from her. Oprah is a very serious person, and she has a very deep understanding of her influence and the importance of her influence. I'm sure that she, like all the rest of us, are listening and watching very deeply to all of the candidates. Nobody's voting in a primary for another year. And so whoever gets her support will have to earn it. She's not going to endorse a candidate because, oh, I know her. We're girlfriends. I mean, you and I are girlfriends. That doesn't mean, that doesn't mean we would say, you know. JFK used to tell a story about a neighbor of his who he had grown up with. And during his campaign for president kept saying, I'm with you all the way. I'm not going to vote for you, but I'm here for you. So, you know, you vote, you know, you could be friends with someone. And
sure. Well, and I guess the question is, even if she didn't, I mean, maybe it's a good thing in the respect that it seems that for a lot of, especially middle Americans. I know you're from Texas, so you understand, grew up with a lot of conservative people, but you've done a lot of work in LA and in New York, which are very liberal to begin with. So when we see celebrity endorsements, so Oprah did endorse, you know, in the governor race, the candidate Stacey Abrams, who went on to lose. Beyonce in Texas endorsed Beto O'Rourke. He went on to lose. In some respects, do you think that celebrity endorsements could sometimes backfire because it's perceived as being, you know, elite people trying to condescendingly push their will on the average voter?
Well, first of all, I don't think the celebrity is seeking to push their will, but I do think, particularly in a case like mine, it can backfire, because what I'm having to repudiate already is this idea of celebrity candidacy. So in my case, I don't know if in every case it's a problem, but in my case, there is that element. I mean, look, Oprah would be huge for anyone, but in general, I think, in my case, more than in some, the image could be there that this is just about fluff or something. But, you know, people who are in the entertainment industry are no less or more American than anyone else. Why shouldn't they express their opinion? So...
Hey, I love Ronald Reagan, and he was an actor. So.
He was, absolutely.
Nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, I think you also have Tom Selleck.
And Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Arnold Schwarzenegger, don't you think he pretty much was a moderate governor? He was, as a governor, I think he was a moderate. He is one of those people who holds the best of both. And you know, seeing through this filter of who's liberal, who's conservative, I think it's part of what needs to go away. I think it limits all of us.
So in terms of polling, so national polling, if we're looking at the rankings, you're generally not polling so well. You're, you know, maybe
there's no national polling yet. Oh, I'll tell you why I do poll well. Wait a minute.
Well, I'm talking about the Real Clear Politics national averages so far.
Well, let me tell you who gets the most, because they're not mentioning my name there. And what's getting the most, 59%, is someone no one's heard of. So when you actually look at the polls, the biggest number goes towards none of the above. So if I'm none of the above, then actually I'm getting the most numbers.
Sure. Well, and in fact, actually, I know in 2016, people who peaked early ended up flaming out. And so in the Republican primary, for example, my guy was Scott Walker, and he flamed out so early.
What's
and I thought he could go all the way. So in that respect, is that something you're hoping for, that maybe some of these people
I don't live in that place. I'm not living from that strata of calculation. To me, that's the corruption of the political process. First of all, as you said, anybody who knows anything about politics knows whoever is quote-unquote ahead right now, it is so irrelevant. But secondly, and I think even more significantly, being on the road, talking to people in Iowa, talking to people in New Hampshire, talking to people in South Carolina and Nevada, the thing is, it really doesn't matter what they're saying on TV. What matters is what the people in Iowa, Nevada, South Carolina, and New Hampshire think in those first 4 primary states. And they take very seriously, my experience, and I haven't traveled to Nevada yet, but in those other 3 states, my experience is that they take very seriously their role. They know that who they elect in their caucuses and their elections will determine the political conversation in the United States for the next 2 years. So they're not listening to what the TV is saying. They're listening to the candidates. And I think that's profound. I think that's very democratic and in a beautiful way. So all of that other stuff, like I said, I'm running in a different conversation, and it doesn't include, it's not about the football game to me. It's about trying to articulate a vision that goes deep into the waters of inspiration, and deeper understanding that is necessary for American people, no matter who we are. I'm not speaking to the black or the white or the Jew or the Hindu or the Muslim or the gay or the straight. I'm talking to the American people, or the conservative or liberal. I'm talking to the American people. When I talk about a moral and spiritual awakening in this country, no side of the political spectrum has a monopoly on concern for values or ethics. And that is the conversation I'm having with people.
I would love the Democratic Party to have the conversation about how they talk about Republicans, because I can't tell you how many times I've been called horrible, horrible names, dehumanizing names.
I do understand, because so have we.
Absolutely. And so I agree that there is this awakening that is needed to be had, and that's something we're trying to do at this network. One question to the point on the nuts and bolts, because I understand you're not focused on the polls, but it is a tool that is used to determine whether someone can be on a debate stage or not.
Yes.
And in order to get over the barrier of not having name ID, what is the strategy then to get onto the debate stage if you're not polling to the level where you would make the cut?
Well, who's to say I won't be, number one? I'm out there. And like I said, it's not about whether or not, I'll see that MSNBC mentioned me, but then Rachel Maddow didn't. I'll see that, I'm on CNN, but then Chuck Todd pretends I don't. I see all that. But even there, it doesn't matter. What matters is in Iowa. What matters is in New Hampshire, where I'm going tonight, or South Carolina, where I was last week. I have an audience. They keep making a big deal about the fact that I have more Twitter followers. Just everybody can relax here. I'm in this competition. And somebody saying I'm not doesn't mean I'm not.
Well, and I think Donald Trump would agree, because at this
Absolutely.
time,
Look at I always say that to
bottom
people.
Of the pack.
When they say you don't have a chance, I say, excuse me, Donald Trump is president. So anybody who thinks they can predict, particularly now.
Yeah. Well, before today, I obviously heard of you, but I didn't know you very well. And then now you're on our show, and guess what? 100,000 young viewers watch our show.
And
so
I'm grateful
you're
for
out
that.
there. Yeah.
I'm grateful.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming. Obviously, you were in New York this morning, and we can't thank you enough for being in the studio. I was expecting you to phone in.
It was a great birthday present. Thank you for joining us,
Thank you, and thank you.
Marianne.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah, good
Thank
luck.
you so much.
Thanks.